What is up, you guys? Welcome to another incredible episode of the Explain It podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Stephen Hunt,
And I'm Ingrid Hernandez.
and we are so excited to give you a quick recap of Owners Club this past week that Ingrid and I were at. Now, real quickly, before we even hop into that, you'll notice that Ingrid and I are in separate rooms today. I am being quarantined per Ingrid. I came back from Boston, and I do have a bit of a cold, so I am powering through this, and I'm grateful that Ingrid was still able to do this with me too. And we're just going to be separate today. We're about 20 feet apart. Her office is right next to mine.
Yeah, I mean, we should take advantage of all the quarantine processes we learned back in the day.
Yes, absolutely. So let's jump straight into it. So Ingrid, before we even talk about what we learned, like what the heck is Owners Club? I see these posts all the time. Like, what the heck is Owners Club? How do I join Owners Club? Like, what is this thing?
Well, Owners Club, at least from my perspective, is really just a mastermind. It's an annualized mastermind with folks who really want to level up their business, and kind of said in the name is we want to be owners and not operators. So Owners Club was to help us see things differently, step up our game on what our goals are. Like, I almost liken it to like a 10x point of view where yeah, this is your goal, but what if you actually push yourself further to make it look bigger? And then if it's going to look that big, what are the things that you need to incorporate into running that business so that it makes sense? So, what do you think? What do you think Owners Club
I
is?
think that was a beautiful explanation. Yeah, it's taking on the mentality of being an owner. Now, one of the cool things with Owners Club to get you into that swing of things is that we're actually owners of Pace Morby's businesses that he has brought to the Owners Club table. So, as a part of being a member of Owners Club, we got the opportunity to buy into his title business, which is now going nationwide. We had the opportunity to be a part of Prop AI, which is the AI outreach software that he's created as well. So we got shares of those companies as being a part of Owners Club, which is super, super cool. We actually got our first disbursement check at Owners Club as well for being a part of the title company, which was a cool experience. Nothing life-changing when it comes to the money aspect, but it was a cool experience. It was awesome to see the collaboration and all the hard work that they're putting in on their end and how it's really coming to fruition, and then being able to learn from those individuals as well that are building these companies, that are scaling these companies at a rapid speed, like hyper rapid speed when it comes to scale.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how quickly, in the grand scheme of a timeline, how quickly Pace was able to build. This is why we're not in the same room, guys. We're in the same room. If you look at Pace and what he's been able to do, one of the life-changing things for me that he kind of made me think about is like what kind of opportunities we provide to feed other people and their families, right? I was always kind of afraid of, honestly, being responsible for that, because that is an awesome responsibility. And to know that your businesses have to help other people thrive, that pressure, that responsibility is a little bit scary. And I remember when I was first starting out thinking like, could I do that? Like, I'm just trying to like eat like myself, like have my own family have food on the table and like ways to pay our bills. And to think bigger was scary. And I feel with what Pace has been able to do and Jamil has been able to do. I mean, Jamil franchised one of the fastest growing franchises in the United States. Like,
Crazy.
that's crazy. So when you think about wanting to scale, wanting to work and operate like an owner versus, an operator per se, you have to have the kind of leadership and mentorship with people who've actually done it. And they've done it, and they've done it quickly, which is, and now we say quickly because that's the part of the iceberg we see. Obviously, they put a lot of work. There's been a lot of years and things like that. But I think like once they got it, they feel like they have this responsibility to pay it forward. And I feel like that's part of what Owners Club is supposed to do, is help us get that push that goes much faster that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Yeah. And I actually thanked Pace for this one off as well. I said, thank you so much. Thank you for over the years failing as fast as you possibly could. Thank you for putting in the work. Thank you for losing money. thank you for doing everything that you've done and spending all the money you've spent to get to where you are at today, so that you could shorten the time frame for myself and for Ingrid and for so many of us here to be able to scale rapidly as well. I mean, the learning curve that has been shortened for us, Ingrid, is insane. And as soon as we run into any problem in our businesses too, it's nice because Jamil and Pace have already been through those things. 99% of the time, they've already been through those things. They can relate it to another aspect of where they were once in their life. As we are getting our businesses off the ground to become self-sustaining organizations, they have the ability to give us insight and shorten the learning curve. We don't have to go looking for it. We don't have to fail a bunch of times. We still have to fail. We still have to put in the work. We still have to do all the things. However, they're shortening that time frame, and that's been invaluable, is what I could say.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think one of my proudest moments, even though it was a vanity number, doesn't mean I was taking home this much. I was actually just talking to somebody about this, that like, first of all, I want to make sure that we're hitting the elephant in the room. Yes, it's the day after the election, and yes, Trump has been declared the winner. But I was talking to somebody on the phone and via text, and I was like, I'm not going to let a president dictate whether or not I'm going to be successful. And in the middle of Biden's presidency, I've made the most. Like, my revenue was almost at $900,000 plus my jobs money, which carried me through over $1 million. Now, again, I wasn't taking all of that home, but I certainly never had it before. And so I don't think it was because Biden was in office at all. I also don't think it was because Trump was in office. I think it was because we put in the work and we focus on the goals that are at hand, and because we still live in the greatest country in the world. And
Absolutely,
those
we do.
types of opportunities are there. And it's whether you want to go and grab that bull by the horns or not. So I think that sometimes we give certain figureheads too much power. And so if you're disappointed today, I empathize with you. If you're excited, good for you. Like, I'm going to still keep doing what I have to do to feed my family.
Oh, absolutely. You should never let who's in power, what's happening in the world affect what you're doing. You should always be planning for the best. I mean, planning for the worst, hoping for the best. It's never going to directly impact you when it comes to business. There's always talks of crazy policies and things like that, but at the end of the day, there's a workaround to everything. You need to know the system. You need to put in the work. You need to be the one to do that. Don't fall into this woe is me mindset because your person didn't win. Because yeah, I agree with Ingrid as well on that. I was doing well during the original Trump presidency, but as the Biden presidency went on, and there were some wrenches thrown into things, I can still say it was the most prosperous time that I've had leading up till now as well. And I hope that we have a continuation of that going into this new presidency as well. But we are in control of that. Nobody's coming to save us. We are the ones that have the ability to choose what we want to do every single day and the decisions that we're going to make every day to make that happen. Nobody else is going to be able to do that for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% agree. And this is why you have to put yourself in a position to succeed. And so just like Owners Club, right? This was a pricey club to get into, at least the priciest club I've ever paid for a whole year. And we're trying to get the most out of it, but we have to get the most out of it because our family's, future depends on it. And that matters. That matters whether or not we're going to put that effort and grow as entrepreneurs and get better at what we do. So that's that's I think the confidence I've also grown. I wouldn't just say through Owners Club, but in the last few years, because it takes a minute to get out of that employee mindset.
Oh, yeah.
You get conditioned, and you get conditioned to say, okay, dear CEO of my company, give us the vision. Where are we headed? How do I help us move that needle along? And
Yeah.
so when you're always getting that direction, I mean, for me, I feel like I was a good leader, and I always kept that perspective in mind as like, what's that vision he's casting? Because it was always a he. and how do I help move my department towards that and make sure that we were meeting our goals? And when you don't have that, you're like, oh God, how do I make sure that I'm that person?
Well, and it's so different too. It really is. Like I remember talking to Cody Barton about this and I was like, dude, I was crushing it in corporate America. Like when it came to leadership, when it came to sales, when it came to all the things. But when you go into your own business, because when you're in corporate America, we all have this idea of like, I'm gonna go into entrepreneurship and I know what I'm gonna do different than what this company's doing. And I think I got it figured out. And then you actually do it. And you realize that every last little task, every movement, everything relies fully on you. So even though we have the leadership experience, even though we have some of these things which are great, we essentially got a paid internship, a high income paid internship to learn these skill sets, and they are absolutely able to be delivered into entrepreneurship. It's just very different because everything relies on you. If there's an issue with the emails, we're not going to IT to say, hey, can you get this fixed? Right? If somebody didn't have a good experience after we purchased their property or flipped a house or anything like that, we can't go over to the fulfillment team and say, hey guys, can you make sure you get this handled? I'm trying to work on the next deal. It's every last thing falls on you until you can really learn how to systemize those things. So you are in a rapid learning pace, and you're doing things that you don't want to be doing all the time. And that's part of doing the work that you have to do to get to where you want to be. And eventually you can systemize those things. Eventually, when there's enough revenue and you've put in that work, you can bring more people on to help you out.
Yeah. Well, I would love to know if those of you in the comments were at Owners Club or are part of Owners Club, or have heard of Owners Club, and sort of what's been your perspective on it, especially if you were there. I see a few folks on here like Drew and Josh. I don't see other comments. So was Sunia in Owners Club? I don't know if I've met him, if he was. I love that name though. Sunia Kinney, I believe. Hopefully I said that right. But okay, let's talk through what were some of the most important takeaways from our Owners Club experience in Boston. I'm wearing my New England shirt today.
Yeah.
Because, Tumanowski gave it to us, but yeah. Oh, it's Sunia joined Sub2 2 weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations, Sunia.
Yeah, look at another guy taking his future by the balls and getting better at his skills.
That was the most life-changing money I've ever spent in my life, Sunia. What a great decision you've made. All it takes now on your end is to make sure that you are collaborating, that you're connecting with people, and that you're putting in the work on whatever it is that you want to do. Don't copy what everybody else is doing. Figure out what it is that works for you and what you want to do so that you can wake up feeling energized and that you have a purpose as to what you're working towards every day. That's my only advice I would give on it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic advice for sure. We're getting some good questions. By the way, keep them coming. If you guys have questions about, mine and Steven's personal journey, we were into Sub2, and really the progression of where we've invested. I'm happy to also provide that too. But anywho, that was great advice for Sunia, because really, I would echo Steven's sentiments. It was the most nerve-wracking money I've ever spent, which was so weird because, we both went to college, right? Go Devils. And we didn't question the money we were spending there. We were just like, okay.
Maybe a little.
Maybe a
little. I was like, did you really need all this?
Yeah.
Why did the professor write the textbook that I have to buy?
But it was accredited though, right? So those frameworks kind of make us feel more comfortable with spending that money. But when I compare my degree, my bachelor's degree, versus learning what I learned in Sub2, and like the first year that I was very intentional about learning that first year, like the Sub2 skills are the ones that, in my opinion, are paying off dividends in a much greater. Yeah, for sure.
It's, what's funny about that too is it's not even just the Sub2 skills. So it's not the real estate journey that we both went on, Ingrid. It opened my mind up to business more than my mind has ever been opened up to business. And I'm somebody that obsessed over it, right? When I was before I got into Sub2, going through college, working my corporate jobs, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I was reading a business book every single week. I was learning about leadership, how to grow a business, how to start a business. I was trying to get every last detail of every piece of information that I possibly could so that one day I could be an entrepreneur. And I joined Sub2 and I saw all these like-minded individuals taking action and going after it. But the way that you transact in Sub2 is so similar to how you transact anything in business. And it gives you such a great understanding of how to get deals done, how to go find what you actually want, how to go generate everything absolutely from scratch. So it was such a mindset shift joining Sub2. Yes, the skill sets of knowing how to do a Sub2 transaction and work through title, it's awesome. Super, super cool stuff. But there's so much more that came along with that. And there's so many resources and friends that I made along the way with that have helped me really just catapult my career into entrepreneurship, where I didn't feel comfortable to do that previously by myself.
Yeah. Like maybe if there had been a fraternity slash sorority in college that had this very specific, that's kind of what it feels like, right? And it feels like we're all, besides Owners Club, because it really is a club, but Sub2 in general is a community, is a club. I feel like you're in the club. I don't know if all of you just heard the rap song in the back of your head when I said in the club. And because you're around such like-minded individuals, it does open up your perspectives on what you can achieve. And to your point, Stephen, like being in this environment and the fundamentals that Sub2 can teach you, like again, it's a misnomer to think that they're only teaching you creative. They actually teach you how to run a business. And all like we Pace used to call it the conveyor belt, right? Like here's the conveyor belt of business. You have your lead generation, your lead management, like your closing, your fulfillment, like disposition, like just all of those things. I was like, oh my gosh, all of this is transferable to any business.
Literally.
And he used to talk about leads is the lifeblood of your business. If you don't have leads, you don't have a business, you have a hobby. So when he said that, I was like, oh shit, I have a hobby.
Yeah.
At the time that I was doing this.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely the lifeblood. The way that I've always phrased it too, and getting into starting my own businesses as well, I've even had to shift some of this approach where I'd say the leads and the sales of a business, it's the oxygen to a business. You can't breathe without it. There's no even starting, right? Unless you have leads and you have sales coming through to start a business. And Pace talks so heavily about that. How to go find leads, how to go do all the things, and really opening up your mind to what that looks like. Now you kind of go a little bit further. Now you start generating all the leads. You have all the sales coming in. Now we have fulfillment and operations of that business, which I call the heart of the business. So we have the oxygen of the business, then we have the heart of the business. And the heart of the business is what's going to keep everything pumping. It's going to keep everything moving along. It's so that you can keep focusing on generating as many leads as possible, closing as many sales as possible, doing as many deals as possible, really leaning into that and keeping everything moving along and making sure that it's a great client experience and you have good client retention, you have good employee retention when you actually get the whole operational side of this down. And I feel like that's a lot more of what Owners Club even talks about. I feel like there was way less talk about the lead generation, which we talk about so much in Sub2. But now that we are at this stage where, okay, generating leads really isn't an issue, right? It's not too hard to do that. Yes, it takes work, but it's become so much more easy to us because we've been doing it consistently. Now Owners Club is talking about how do we operate the business? Do we bring somebody in to partner up with us to operate that business? What does that look like? What should they be in control of? What should you be in control of? Whose roles are doing what? So it really starts to expand out on now, okay, we've started the business. You probably don't like your life. You might not love to come into work every single day because you feel like you're just on a hamster wheel. So how do we scale out of that? How do we bring an operator in so that you can focus on doing the things that you love so we can take this to the next level?
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of goes into Rena's question. When did you know it's time to level up to Owners Club from Sub2? I do have some opinions about this.
Yeah, go for that.
Because I would argue that there are some people in Owners Club that maybe weren't ready for Owners Club. You can clearly see that right away. I'll give you one example. We were given a task in June to create our Mount Everest. And there's some context behind that. So Pace kind of went through like how ginormous Mount Everest actually is. And I have zero wants to climb that thing, like the
Yeah.
real. But when, he was talking about just how big it is, and, you guys know Pace, like he's so good about contextualizing things in a way that you can consume and understand it. Like anybody can understand. So, um, it made me realize that we weren't thinking big enough about our, golden age property solutions business, seniorgaps.com, guys, if you would like to check it out. But it did help me and helped you, I think, all align on like, okay, what is that huge vision cast that we need to put together so that we're on the same page, and actually put some data and numbers behind it, because that's how our brains like it. Like when you have numbers and things that are tangible, your brain then seeks out how to get you to that thing that you want. And now when people ask me, what's your Mount Everest? I say that one sentence liner like nobody's business, because we are now in November, for crying out loud, and we should be able to say it that easily. And
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, so there were some folks in Owners Club that could not easily identify or say that. And I think it really showcased like who's there, who maybe was at the right rung, and maybe they need to take a consideration to say, okay, am I ready for this rung? Am I ready to move forward and vision cast this big? And so my opinion is, if you can't even get to that point, then I think it was premature to join Owners Club, because your mind, if anything, your mindset is not in the right place yet, and you have some business maturity to still go and like complete. So that's one. And the other very obvious for me, Rena, is whether or not you're financially sound. I don't like to make any decision if it means I'm not going to be able to feed my family. Now, there's some very heroic accounts of how, I had, I think about like The Rock, who had like $7 in his pocket or something and was able to transform it. It really helped him push beyond what he was able to do. But it was only him. He didn't have a family to support, which my family dynamic is I have a whole family to feed. So my back against the wall looks a little different than other folks. And I would say I think of things kind of like in a bell curve, because I am a nerd. So if everything's in a bell curve, those stories are very extreme on either end. So I generally am more centrist. So I'm like, how am I going to hit those? I'm more conservative in my approach. So I think if you are consistently making income, Rena, and you have a clearer picture of what you want to accomplish in your future, and you understand the fundamentals of business, not necessarily sub 2 per se, because I don't think it's a sub 2 progression. It's maybe you want to be the best roofing company of all time. That's nothing to do with sub 2. But Owners Club could help you think bigger than what you have. So that's how I know, like, you're consistently making money, and making this investment in yourself isn't going to take like food away from your family's table. Well, what's your take on it, Steven?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that it's very much so centered around trying to build efficiencies, how to become more loud, how to really pour gasoline more so on the business that you already have. So we did run into those folks that hadn't started their business, but they kind of had an idea, but they didn't really define it. I would say the ideal candidate, somebody that's going into Owners Club, is somebody that started their business. Maybe they're tripping, maybe they're stumbling on themselves because they don't really know what the next steps are, but they're generating income and they have a vision. They have kind of where they want to go. Now, to that Mount Everest point, something I'd love to point out too is that when you do have your business, now the most important thing is to always just get started. Just go. Just get it going. But take that moment to self-reflect. And I do this. I'm premature on this. I always start with the end in mind, right? Before I even start the business. I'm always like, what am I trying to accomplish with this business? Do I want to sell this business one day? Is this a business that I want to operate for the rest of my life? What do I ultimately want to accomplish with this business? And I work myself backwards from there to really create this entire vision. Because you guys, what ends up happening is you are going to grow. When you put in the work and when you are taking action, you're going to grow, and the business is going to continue to grow. And there's going to become a point in time where you don't have the ability to drive that forward anymore. You're going to get stuck in a certain place. You're going to become overwhelmed, and you're going to have to create efficiencies, and you're going to have to bring other people into the business, whether that's employees, whether that's partnerships, whatever the case is. You're going to have to bring these people in, and nobody's going to want to work with you if you do not have a vision and a clear expectation of what the end is going to look like. You want to be able to talk to that, and you want to have that in the back of your head, and you can drop it at any moment. Ingrid just said that she could rattle this off instantly, our Mount Everest, when it comes to senior gaps. And that's because we've talked about it into oblivion. We've talked about it every single day. Like it makes so much sense to us. We know exactly the direction that we'd want to go. Now it's a matter of, okay, cool. We see the full picture of what we're trying to accomplish here. Now we can take the steps to say, how do we implement to make sure that those things are becoming a reality?
Yeah. Ooh, I would love your opinion on Sunia's feedback around this. Sunia says, I'm in construction for my job now. My end goal is everything multifamily, whether it's wholesale, fix and flips, and buy and hold. I'm starting with wholesale. Do I try residential first or go big and try MF?
Ooh. Personally, I mean, I'm a residential guy. Don't get me wrong. I love multifamily. I love development plays. I love all those things. But I personally, for me, would start in residential because it's a different breed of people that you'll be talking to. The sellers are going to be completely different than the sellers you're going to be talking to in multifamily. You're most likely not going to run across a distressed seller that's in the same pain points as a distress when it comes to residential as you are in multifamily that owns, 127 units. They're going to be a little bit more astute, most likely. They're going to be a little bit more high level. They're going to have a little bit more of an understanding of what the real estate market looks like, what their property's valued at, all that kind of stuff. And they're going to want to get certain numbers out of those properties. Whereas when you go to the residential side, these are pains where people need to alleviate themselves. And it's just you one-on-one with that person. I personally think it would be easier to dip your toe into the residential side and then start working your way into the multifamily side. I'm not saying you got to hang out there forever, just saying maybe dip your toe into it a little bit before you even rule out the residential side. A lot of the times I see people trying to go straight into multifamily. It usually is because there's an ego attached with it, is what I've noticed, is just because people think, wow, I'm just going to go big right from the start. I want to be the whale hunter that went and got the cool big thing. But that's only cool when it happens. And then the next day it's like, well, what else is happening in your world? And it's few and far between that you're getting these multifamily deals at the same volume that you're going to be able to get the residential deals to be able to get all of your training and development for yourself in.
Yeah. I would echo a lot of what you have to say, with the exception if it's small multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're talking about like duplex to a duplex to triplex to fourplex, I think you can still very much play in that space because it's still the in between residential and multifamily, and you're still talking to a lot of smaller players, like small sellers, right? And the up down of it is still reasonably like affordable. I'll say affordable, but I don't mean affordable. I mean like obtainable, right? And in terms of cost, like what it would cost to buy, and like using your sub2 skills, how you can leverage those creative finance ways to actually buy them with relatively no partner. Once you start getting into like 20 units or more, that's when you have to start creating a team. For me, multifamily is a team sport. It's really, really difficult to do it by yourself. So when you think about this is owning a whole bunch of single families at scale, with the upside is that it's all in one place, right? Like Stephen and I, we have our 14 properties, respectively, but they're all over the state. And I have one in Houston, and so the economies of scale are not there where they are in multifamily. And to Stephen's point, the bigger in the units too, you're talking about a completely different seller who might be more snobby, like, white collar dudes. That's sort of the stereotype that I have in my head. And just because I like to be a little bit controversial, you're in construction. I don't know what kind of construction job you have. I don't know what kind of corporate experience you've had. I know that when I came into Sub2, I had almost, I think at the time, 17 or 18 years of corporate. So you have to speak very specifically so that people can hear you. You have to understand the dynamics going around you. You have to understand office politics. And all those things actually play in my favor in like the higher unit multifamily space. In the residential space, it actually works against me. It works against me to be too professional. That's why I wear t-shirts all the time now. But like you have to be a little bit more casual in the residential space. So that might actually, again, I'm being judgmental, Sunia. So you could just tell me like, shut up, Ingrid. You don't know what it's like to frame. I don't know what you do. So I'm just saying that you have to kind of understand who is the avatar you're serving, and then how do you use your current skills to serve them, or do you have to upskill in certain things? And I think if you start in residential, that's where you can start like really cleaning up those skill sets so that you can try your hand in multifamily.
It's a lower cost to entry, even if you're talking about duplexes, triplexes, and whatnot. We have a fourplex that was sold recently with our property management business, and the buyer kept it in management with us, but they sold that property for $1.2 million, that fourplex, and that's a lot of money comparatively to buying a $240,000 house like we just did yesterday, Ingrid, right? That we just closed on. So that's a little bit more manageable, especially if you have some extra funds set to the side and you're wanting to do this. Hey, I just want to do this on my own. That's how I did my first fix and flip. Maybe you don't have the skill set yet just to start raising private money consistently. So maybe it's something on that side of it to where it gives you the opportunity to test things and learn things. Does this work? That's what I did my whole first year. I over renovated the crap out of a bunch of properties. I did all sorts. I removed walls that didn't need to be removed. I completely changed layouts of houses, and it gave me all this experience, very expensive experience to gain. However, it gave me this experience to where now I can go in and I can understand, okay, this is exactly what needs to be done based on how much house that I have that I'm working with. And then that is immediately transferable over to the multifamily side of things. Okay, if I'm going to buy these 72 units, and I know that each unit's about 555 square feet and they're all 2-bed, 1-baths, each unit should approximately cost me this amount of money. And I know that if I buy my materials in bulk over here, I can actually get a 25% discount on the tile. I can actually get a 30% discount on the flooring. Okay, cool. I'm going to buy into this multifamily because now I have a really strong understanding of what kind of value I can provide to these units, how I can increase the rents, and what that multiple is going to look like. There's just way more math. There's just way more red tape when it comes to multifamily. So I think it's just way easier to dip your toe into the residential side first.
Yeah. Well, I will say, kind of bringing it back to Owners Club,
Yeah.
I have two really big takeaways. One was not an aha moment, but more of a reinforcement moment. And the other one was an aha moment for me. And it was something that Pace learned from Grant Cardone, speaking of Mr. Multifamily. And I really thought like, wow, that's so true. And then when I lined that back up or parallel it to my corporate experience where self-service and like was such a, and democratizing our data for self-service was such a big deal, that when we were trying to, so let me back up. So this was what Pace learned from Grant Cardone that was such a big aha moment for me. He talked about when you work really, really hard to, to do things like what we're doing here on YouTube and get a following. Of the following that you get, you sell them, and it might be a workshop, it might be an education course, it might be something like that in like, because this is all business, right? So when somebody catches on your funnel, you're only going to get about 1%. And across industries, that's very typical. 1% of who you market to is technically who you end up doing business with, if that marketing reaches them, right? So when you've kind of self-selected when you're subscribing or hitting the bell in YouTube, which by the way, go ahead and do that if you haven't done that yet. So you're only going to be able to sell them, the 1% of those folks. What about the 99%? And Pace was told by Grant Cardone that that's where he became a billionaire. The 1% was where he was a millionaire. He became a millionaire by his followers and like the education and workshops he sold to, his sales coaching stuff. But the 99% is where he became a billionaire. Why? because he understood that that 99% was not going to be like me and you, Stephen. They weren't going to spend the money for education. They were just going to be on information overload. But what they needed was a done for you model. Meaning, if I can bring something to the table that makes them feel like they've made progress without even having to lift a finger, they don't have to worry about HR. And Sunia, think about this as a multifamily perspective, right? You're going to have to employ lots of people. You have to be able to operate all those people. So you need leadership underneath you as well, and be able to do all of those things through multifamily. Multifamily is just a business at a grander scale. And if you can buy into that and do nothing except give your money, that's how Grant Cardone became a billionaire, by focusing on the 99%.
So awesome.
Yeah.
So
That was
awesome.
my takeaway.
He revolutionized the industry of multifamily, truly. He was one of the first people to really be public and be an influencer and create Cardone Capital and give people that are the everyday people the ability to invest in this mega asset, right? If you have as little as $1,000, you can invest with me into this, and this is what your returns are going to look like. And you can have ownership in this huge product that I'm going to do all the work. All you have to do is put the money in, and now you can be engaged, you can be involved. And what do you think that did for his engagement as well, for people that actually watch his content, people that were just sitting on the sidelines watching his content, and they go, you know what, I got an extra 50K in the bank. I think I think I'll throw 5,000 at this. It seems credible. It's something that I want to be a part of. And he did it over and over and over again. And he showed the proof of concept, and he showed the results everybody was getting. Like, this guy changed that industry almost entirely. And we've seen such a surge of influencers doing the same exact thing, because previously to this, it was primarily all institutional money that was going into large multifamily. At least the stuff that Grant Cardone's doing, $850 million purchases in Miami, 800 units, like crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And so, I mean, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I had like Grant Cardone and Ken McElroy the other person. And I found Ken through like Bigger Pockets. And I was like, oh, he lives in Arizona. This is great. So for me, that was like a big, and so then it makes me think about like what our marketing looks like, right? If we do want that Mount Everest goal of helping 1,000 seniors transition from their personal home into sustainable long-term care, right? That's our Mount Everest in the next 5 years. How are we designing our service to be a done-for-you model in a way that's easily conveyed, right? I will say one thing that we still need to work on is, how do we communicate what service we provide without people getting confused about what service we provide? It is something that I feel like I have to end up pitching and explaining, which is great because it gives me more opportunity to do that. And the more you do it, the better you get at explaining. But at the same time, you may only get that one shot with an executive working a senior living facility that maybe it's a big regional player, right? So you have to be really, you and I have to be really mindful to say, how is a done for you model and understanding that strategy incorporated into what we do? Because truly, that's what we were trying. Oh, okay, he's taking notes, guys. I just aha moment him. So it's like, that's truly how we have to think about our business, is how are we lining up with that?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Mm-hmm. Totally agree with that. Yeah, that's such a beautiful piece of advice and information that he shared while we were there. What was the other one? Because you said that was the first one that stuck out to you. You said there was two big ones that really stuck out to you.
And then the other thing that really stuck out to me, once again, and it's threaded into everything we do, but the networking. And it doesn't matter if it's a small networking thing or this huge networking thing where it costs a lot of money. One of the most valuable things that you can do is ask two questions. What do you have? And what do you need? And asking those two questions, whether you're at one of our in-person meetups, which we're supposed to have one next week, by the way.
Yes.
We'll communicate that out to you guys, by the way. or if you're in this very exclusive club where you're paying $25,000 or more to be in the room for only 1 year, those two questions are so pivotal and important in your networking because it's extremely intentional, and I was thinking like, wow, I've been able to grow with Pace to some extent because I've been in all of his masterminds except the first two. And because I volunteered and I wanted to see how I could, help with his mastermind, having been in it already. And those two questions get you so far if you can intentionally go and speak to people. And because we have such a go-giver mentality based on the environment and the precedents that Pace has put together, like those two questions can get you so much more business. What do you think?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But here's the other side to that too, guys. If you are going to these things, if you're coming to our meetup, if you're joining masterminds, great questions to be asking. You should ask yourself that question before you even step in there though, because other people are going to ask you the same question and say, what do you have? What do you need? And I'm going to tell you right now, 70% of the people that I talk to go, I have and it's the stumbling. I'm like, okay, let's back it up. What do you do? Right.
Mhm.
And then we have to kind of work through it. So being able to know exactly what it is that you're looking for. This is why my wife and I were able to hit the ground running so quickly. And I'm sure it goes the same for you, Ingrid, is that every single event that we went to, and this was a full-time job to us. We looked at this as a full-time job. We went into every event going, the whole purpose of tonight is that we're raising private money. We need to raise private money tonight. This is all we're going to talk to everybody about. We're not talking about the deals we're doing unless it involves private money and who knows the right private money lenders. And we would sit there and we would go back and forth to this person, to that person, to this person, to that person until we found the right people to talk to. So being intentional with what you're actually looking for while you're there too, and then being able to ask everybody those questions and then making the connections. Think about being a great host. If I'm hosting a party at my office, if Ingrid and I are doing a meetup and um, I meet Sharon Lee Smith, right? I meet Sharon Lee Smith there, and Sharon Lee Smith goes, I raise money for multifamily. And I go, cool. I don't do any multifamily. This isn't something that maybe we can work on and collaborate on right now. But then I go talk to Brad over here and he goes, I'm looking for somebody that can raise money with multifamily. And I make those connections happen. Think about the impact that makes for those two individuals. I got to be the one that connected those two individuals. It's helped me sprout more relationships. And now I have people where this guy's developing multifamily and Sharon over here is raising the money for the multifamily. Cool. This has just created more opportunities that I have to work with now because I was being a great host in terms of making the connections for other people because I'm looking for what I need. And then I get to tell both of those individuals, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking to raise private money for fix and flip opportunities in Arizona. And then
Mhm.
they can start thinking, oh my gosh, I just met this guy over here at the bar and you should really talk to him. So they start looking for us as well, right? We've turned everybody into our network at that point in time.
Yeah. And then you have to also understand like where you are in your journey on whether or not you would monetize that scenario. And let me give you a perspective. When I started in Sub2, right? Like, first of all, even though I had had my license since 2013 and I had real estate experience, I still thought that I didn't have much to offer because I wasn't an investor per se. I mean, I had dabbled in investing, but not a whole lot, not in any confident way. That's why I was in Sub2 in the first place. Um, so the way that I was able to get out of my shell over that was, one, get educated. So you like, I am that person that if you give me the manual and you give me a toy, I'm going to read the manual before I get excited with the toy. I mean, that's just my personality. It's just the way I work.
Yeah.
And then aside from that, then I felt like I was worthy. Like, oh, you mean page 3 on the contract? Yeah, absolutely. What Pace meant by that or whatever, right? And then second to that, then I just started giving without an expectation of receiving, meaning I would make those connections. And I was in a place where I didn't have to earn. I was just ready to learn, right? And so when I was making connections with folks, I didn't have an expectation of making money because I was trying to build my personal brand, right? I would say even now I'm probably still I still lean more to give and expect not to receive. But there are some points that if I was going to make a connection like that, and if you were like, yes, I raised capital for multifamily, And I know that there's other folks doing multifamily. I may say, hey, if I bring you a multifamily deal, can we figure out how I could get compensated if I bring you that multifamily deal because you've raised capital for it? Yes, yes. Okay, 3% or whatever that might look like. Okay, great. And I almost did that on a deal coming out of the Owners Club in June, and you know about it. It's that Fountain
Yeah.
Hills deal. Yeah, I brought the money. I even had them walk the property, and they had the deal. And so I had lined that up first, right? Because actually that matters from an SEC rule and all those things. It's important that people understand your motives before you create a connection where you're expecting to get compensated for. You cannot assume that you're just going to get compensated. I actually brokered that expectation with the person with the deal before I went looking for that money that I knew was already in the room.
Mm. It's so
So,
good. It's so good to make these connections, and I mean, I think a great example of that, Ingrid, is it's one of the deals you did in the early on days, and I remember it was this rip. It was fat. It was up in Sedona, and somebody that you met at a meetup that you showed what you do and how you can add value ran into a situation where they specifically needed the value that you could provide because you connected with them and you guys were able to talk about what you're actually doing and what do you have, what do you need, right? Because you had that exact conversation. So this person ends up bringing the lead to you. And how big was that rep? How big was that whole thing?
the wholesale fee was $250,000.
Woo.
We had said, hey, if you have a deal like this, I will give you 20%. Not like this, but I said, if you have a deal and you bring me the lead, I'll give you 20% of whatever that assignment fee is. So he got his very first wholesale deal with me. He made $50,000. I got $100,000, and then my other partner, who I also leaned on, and who I also met during a meetup, Anthony Pappas, my land guy.
Hey,
He's the one.
collaboration.
Yeah. So this was all a domino effect of networking. That's all. It was
That's
a domino
crazy.
effect of networking and intentionally networking. So when you don't intentionally network, don't expect to get an outcome. You're playing the lottery at that point. And I don't like to play the lottery. I feel like it's gambling, right? You're just going to lose your money. I like to be more intentional and know that there's going to be a number at the end of that intentional networking.
The only way that you're going to be able to build confidence in this industry, and this does go into Owners Club as well, and be able to get to the point where you can scale and you can continue to grow yourself is by doing the thing. So that's why I said in the very beginning, you just got to start taking the actions. You got to start doing the thing. But eventually, at some point, you need to start thinking about getting the end in mind. The wholesaler in this situation with that deal we just broke down with Ingrid was just going out and taking the action, didn't know really how to fill out the paperwork, didn't
Couldn't
know
hardly
where to
speak
take the deal.
English.
He
Could
sure didn't know
hardly
Anthony's
speak
papas.
English.
Yeah, didn't even speak English. Where Ingrid speaks Spanish, so could communicate with him. So he goes, hey, yo, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah, tengo un lead.
Here, tengo un yada. And Ingrid goes, oh my gosh, I have the perfect person for this. I know exactly who can do this. And Ingrid made $100,000 from connecting. This guy, the wholesaler, made $50,000. I guarantee you that's the biggest check he's ever seen dropped in his bank account ever in his life. Guarantee.
It is. For sure.
And the opportunities that opened up for him. And think about the confidence he built going, oh my God, I did it. This is real. I can do this. Yeah. He doubled down immediately. He doubled down on doing that exact strategy, going and finding deals, and he got involved in the real estate industry.
Yeah. And let's be honest, even this podcast, right? Everything you do in this business has to have some intentionality behind it. What is our intentions behind this podcast? For you guys to understand who we are and build credibility with you. Stephen and I have, indirectly built raised a lot of capital from this podcast. And we're not even we're not forwardly asking hey, send me your capital. We'll connect and figure out a deal with it. We don't do that. We just talk about what we're working on, how much money we've made certain people, and answer your questions, bring experts on here so that this podcast is even being networking with you with intention. We want you guys to know that we know what we're talking about. And when we don't, we bring on an expert so that we then know what we're talking about. Yeah. So Anyway, like everything you do in this business needs to have some level of intention, some level of strategy. So, but Josh asked this question. I think I kind of answered it, but I'd love your feedback, Stephen, because he asked specifically when you're just getting started to like flipping.
When you're just getting started to flipping, yeah, there's a few ways to leverage the experience of others when you're just getting started flipping. It is potentially hiring on somebody that's already flipping to help manage that project using their team and making sure that they're getting a cut of this. I just had a friend of mine recently that did this with another flipper that we actually had on our show, Jem Montero, and wanted to build a relationship with Jem, wanted to learn how Jem was flipping these properties, brought the opportunity to Jem, brought the funding opportunity to Jem as well, said, hey, I got this. I just want you to run this entire project so I can learn from you. And paid Jem $40,000, which is what Jem probably would have made on any other flip. Paid him $40,000 just to do this with no risk to Jem whatsoever. So of course, Jem was willing to say, here's every resource I have. Here's how I do absolutely everything. And really helped expedite the learning of that wholesaler, essentially, that brought the deal, that wanted to get into the fix and flip space. So that's one way that I would probably go about doing it. One way that I would not go about doing it is just asking the shadow people, or if they can go out to coffee so you can pick their brain, that they just want, 10 to 15 minutes of their time, because I can promise you right now, people don't have the time for that. Bring them money, bring them opportunities, and they'll be way more willing to work with you. Promise you. Or get over it and just try doing it yourself and be willing to take some losses. That's really your two routes here. You got to bring value, or just try to figure it out yourself.
Yeah. I don't recommend the latter. Like I recommend bring the opportunity. That's literally what I did with my first few fix and flips, because I was in those shoes too, Josh, where it's like, how do I get started when I don't have all the things to get started? And so the first few deals, I literally contracted them because I used my agent experience to like go on these appointments and actually get the deals. After making sure that having fiduciary isn't something they were looking for. They didn't want people coming through their house. They didn't want all the things that just annoy folks. Like literally, Mark and I just had another one this past week while I was in Boston, where I knew for a fact he was going to make more money by putting on MLS. And what did I do? I was like, hey, here's our cash offer. Here's our creative offer, or we can list it. And he went with the listing, which not everybody does. So I think that that's being a responsible investor when you're actually providing the options to people. But anyway, had he chosen the cash offer, of course, this is where Stephen and I would have teamed up to fix it. And that's exactly what I did as an agent when I first started. Was I was having these meetings, and if they chose cash, I brought the deal. I brought it over to they're not in business together, so I won't say their name. But they flipped it for us, showed us all the things that were happening, and that's how I got started. I didn't, and I may have not made any money. That was the risk I was taking, but I wanted to learn.
Yeah, and be okay with not making money.
Yes,
so that you can learn. I mean, I did the latter. When Ingrid says she doesn't recommend the latter, I did the latter, and I can tell you right now, it's not that I didn't make money; it's that I lost a lot of effing money because I chose to do the latter. So do you have the pain tolerance for that? Or do you think it might be better to say, hey, I can take a back seat and not worry about making profit on these deals. I'm going to bring the opportunities to the table. Another approach that I've had too, where people have approached me, is bringing money to me saying, hey, I will fund your fix and flip. I'm not going to charge anything on this. I just want you to use the capital, and I just want to come along for the process. Ingrid and I are working with somebody right now that wants to learn creative finance, that has a lot of liquidity. And he goes, I will lend this to you at 0% interest, no payments due until the very end of the deal. I just want to learn how to do a creative finance deal. And that's the cost that they're willing. It's not costing them anything. They're just not making extra money on it, but they get the knowledge in return. How awesome is that? There's too many greedy people out there, you guys.
Totally. Which you just reminded me, we need to have that conversation with him, because we got 2 co-living opportunities out here in Arizona that would be creative buys, but they all require significant investment, between $50,000 and $60,000 for the renovation work. Easy to buy, harder to stabilize.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the way these look. So, but I'm with you, Josh. Like, I get tired of all these deals we're looking every day. And even before I even send them to my husband or Steven to look at, I've already said no. It's
Hmm.
it can get very, very frustrating, but I think that's just the market we're in right now.
Yeah.
It's going to get
It's not
more.
impossible, Josh. By any
Mhm.
means, it's tough to find deals, but here's what I would do if I were you looking to get started in the fix and flips and finding the good deals and all that kind of stuff is you need to define the specific markets that you want. Ingrid and I look all over the place, but we do have defined areas that are like hell yeah areas to us. I would pick 3 or 4 cities, market only to try and find properties in those cities, network with wholesalers, network with agents, and look for deals that you think that makes sense just initially. So big thing for Ingrid and I is that it has to have at least 100K spread from the ARV that they're pitching versus the purchase price. It has to have at least that amount of spread in there because of all the fees that come along with it. And then make your offer or submit and say, hey, I can't buy this at 260. I need to buy this at 230. That's the only way it could work for me. And then let it be. Follow up with them in a week or so, but let it be. That's how the past 3 deals, Ingrid and I were just talking about this, the last 3 deals that we just bought were because we threw out a number that was $30,000-$40,000 less than what the wholesaler brought it to us at. Wholesaler couldn't sell it. They came back to us a week later and go, we're going to come down to your price. Will you still buy this?
Yeah. Basically correct. And then, like I was saying before, you have to have intention in everything you do. One of the reasons I really was excited about this podcast, other than it's a creative outlet and an outlet to just kind of speak my mind, but also because we do get a lot of folks asking for our time. So I sent them my YouTube channel. I'm like, hey, come to this podcast. You can ask all the questions you want. Sometimes we'll even send you guys a link and have you guys up on the platform, which we maybe should have done today too, just because it's just you and I. So reminder for next time.
Yeah.
Because I know we're almost done. But that is another way for us feeling like we're giving back without it taking away from our busy schedule.
Yeah.
Steven's got a little toddler. I've got teenagers. Everybody, our family needs our time. And so we have to be very cognizant of where we're spending it.
It's all about building efficiencies. Take the action and then start building the efficiencies around it, right? Ingrid and I are still doing this podcast. If you look at the original podcast with Ingrid, everything was just done from a laptop. There was no fancy schmancy mics. There was no fancy schmancy lighting. We didn't have a studio set up like this. That was all fun now that we get to have people come and join us with. That just didn't exist. And now it's been a progression and creating more efficiencies to where we can create these things. And now, boom, okay, yeah, we have to have an email list put attached to this. Okay, we have to add this to it. But we've already kept the ball rolling. We've already been taking the action. We've already been going through it. So that way you can start to create efficiencies. Don't create efficiencies around something that you haven't started.
Yeah, totally. I hear you 100. But I think going to Boston was well worth it. If you guys missed my unicorn costume, then you're bad because that was a lot of fun to wear. And
so good.
Just I'm with you. Like, actually, every time we go to these events, I always say I'm capital raising. Like, why am I here? I'm capital raising. Yeah. And if I learn about how to be a better business
and then
owner,
at the end of every single event, Ingrid goes, dude, I raised a shit ton of money.
I sure do.
Verbatim, we always get on the plane. We're like, oh, how was that? Dude, I raised a shit ton of money.
And I did. Okay.
Yeah.
People were like, how do I invest in what you got going? How do I, buy properties with you out here? I'm so, so grateful for the relationships that Sub2 and Owners Club has brought our way, because I really do think that's a very important element to anybody doing business.
So. Oh, 110%. 110%. Before we do sign off too, I will share one piece of advice that Pace said. So there's a few quotes, there's a few things people have said to me throughout my life, as it happens with most of us, that were like, wow, that was really good. It's something I want to start living my life by. One of those things for me was my wife's father said to me, you need to keep your give a shit gauge on 0. You need to stop caring as much about so much of the minutia and everything that's going on. Like, you need to just like get through it. Stop caring as much. Doesn't mean you don't care about anything. It just means like, hey, let it roll off your shoulder, essentially, right? Don't care so much. It's just going to do you more harm. It's like drinking poison. So that's number one. And then Pace gave one to me actually through Owners Club, which was a huge, huge takeaway. And I hope there's a takeaway for you guys too. It's a little bit harsh, but he says, shut your stupid mouth and do your stupid job. You're not overwhelmed. You're just inefficient. And that
Oh,
for me is like mic drop all day long. So now I sit here and I go, oh man, I got to get this done and I got to get this done. Wait, shut your stupid mouth and do your stupid job. You're not overwhelmed. There's not too much to do. You're just inefficient. That's all it is.
yeah. That's awesome. I love that. Actually, you told us we're not allowed to use the word overwhelm.
Yeah.
So, okie dokie.
Yeah.
What with 6 leaders in Sun City, how can we fit your senior to rest home model? What do you think it says? What is your
I
interpretation?
think that with 6 long-term rentals and ooh, you see how I did
Oh,
that? With
long-term
6 long-term rentals in Sun
rental.
City, we can
How
fit your
can
senior
to
to
rest?
rest home model. That part I don't fully.
Broski. This is what I'm telling you that people don't understand what we do. Because so here's the deal. When you're an investor, you are like, what do you mean? And then I think there was like 4 or 5 different conversations I had where I was trying to explain what we did. And I would by the way, one of my biggest pet peeves is to get interrupted before I finish my sentence. But when it happens like habitually, right? I'm looking at you, Manatsukanian. You love to do that. But like it's just hard. It makes it difficult to communicate. So you have to let me finish the sentence and then ask your questions. But it happened a lot where I couldn't explain what we did because I think people got so excited maybe about that we were serving the senior community that they all of a sudden, oh, you do co-living for seniors. I was like, no, I'm not even done with my sentence. Oh, you're buying facilities. Well, maybe in phase 2. Actually, in phase 2, we might buy facilities, but we're not there yet. The service we provide right now doesn't have that piece of it yet.
Yeah.
And so it was really difficult to communicate. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm trying to figure out how do we cater our message specifically,
Well,
or
who are
maybe
you talking to? That's what it comes down to as well,
yeah, it's
because
like
if we're
maybe I'm
talking
being
to a
too hard
community,
on
they
myself.
understand where we're coming from. They understand fully what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're talking to investors, yeah, y'all need to shut up and like let us finish what we're saying so we can actually talk about what we're trying to talk about. Um, Always somebody wants to seniors. They hear the word seniors and
Hear the word senior.
assisted living facility. I'm like, please calm down. I have like 4 more words to say, and this will all make
Sharon
sense.
knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, yeah. Like let me finish this thought, and I promise it'll answer your questions. But it also kind of revealed to me who is listening to respond and who is listening to understand. Right. So if you're listening to respond, you're somebody who isn't going to hear what I'm saying anyway. So that was an interesting perspective. But I agree with you. I'm going to give myself some grace that I was talking to these ambitious investors and they were just trying to seek out the bunnies, right? They were trying to seek out the problems
They
and
want
how
to finish your sentence. They want to like, I know what you're talking about. You don't have to explain it to me because I'm so knowledgeable. That's what they're trying to tell you without telling it to you. I know so much about what you're talking about already that I'm going to finish your sentence for you. And I
yeah.
go, well, actually, you got it wrong from the top.
That happened a lot. I felt like a bitch. I was
Yeah.
like, no.
Yeah. What? Shut your mouth.
Johnny, that was good feedback for people. I feel like I've known this for a really long time, but they did tell us that the most of America, they only read at a 5th grade level.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's often because they get through high school and then they never read a book again. Like literally, like that stat is scary. And this is what we have. So when you're communicating, when you're talking to folks, you have to be very clear in your messaging and know that that is the grade level you're catering to. So, but yeah.
Tim Story actually had a fantastic point to this
Mhm.
because I agree. It's called KISS, first and foremost. Keep it simple, stupid. That's the number one thing. So every time we have a message, I always take it back and I go, how can I make this more simple? How can I refine this to be less words? How can I make this so that I'm saying as little as possible, but I'm getting the message across. We're keeping it simple, simple, simple. And what Tim Story said when he was speaking was, let's see here, I actually wrote it down because it was, here it is. If I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter.
Yes.
And I'm like, that is golden.
Yeah. You were born an original. Don't die a copy.
1000%.
All right. Well, this has been a really great podcast. Thank you all for being so active in the comments. Genuinely love it. Like, thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Henry, reach out to us, especially if you have 6 long-term rentals. Ugh, I can't speak. We would be happy to help you with those if you need it. And then we can explain to you a little bit more about what we do and what does that actually mean. So,
yeah.
Well, what do you think, Steven?
I think that this has been a great episode of the Explain It podcast with just the two of us. It's so nice to have just the two of us on. Love having guests, but it's also great when we get the opportunity to reconnect. You guys, sometimes this is the situation where Ingrid and I are actually getting to reconnect. Like, we haven't even broken down what Owners Club meant to us since we got back from Boston, because it's been so go, 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 go. So we're over here. I'm like, I'm learning these things about what Ingrid took away from the conference just as much as you guys are at the same exact time.
Mm-hmm. I know, this is very true. But as always, though, I'm really glad and happy that I get to ride this journey with you and Angel. So really appreciate it.
Well.
It was fun to see the family up in Boston. And so very cool. Well, guys, thanks for being on this episode with the Explain It crew, myself and Steven. We really appreciate you. And as always, we have this podcast every week, every Wednesday from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Arizona time. And be on the lookout because next week we will have our in-person meetup. And so we will be sending out communication very, very soon. And with that, we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.